changes that are proposed. She believes that it is an anti-dog council that is underhand and lying to the public. When asked to support whether she supports the changes to the Dog Control Policy 2022, the answer is no. Do you support the changes to the dog exercise area maps? The answer is no on that. In summation from all that, I would suspect that that submitter is alluding to the policy, and bylaw requires a redraft. If there's any questions on that, I'm not sure I can answer any, but it's a very brief submission.
Indeed it is, and I don't think there's going to be any questions on that. Indeed not. Your next submitter?
Is it Jackie Purves, P-U-R-V-E-S?
And that is on page 223 of our agendas.
In answer to the generic question, do you support the dog control bylaw changes? The answer is no. She strongly opposes the introduction of permits in rural zoned areas for households with 2 or more non-working dogs. Also objects to the requirement for neighbours' consent should the bylaw pass. She does not believe it's in the best interests of the welfare of the dogs or their families. And in particular on this submitter, she thought long and hard before moving to Waikato, and also to a non-covenanted house where there were no restrictions for me and my dogs. She then talks about the 7 households that are the reason effectively for this proposal, and good ownership should not be penalised for this. The Animal Control Office and SPCA should deal with this through their current statutory abilities, and she should not have to incur the cost of a permit. She believes that dog registration should be financially reduced to each dog after 2 and not have an extra permit or fee added. She says that nothing is given from the council for the registration. The nearest dog walking area is over 15 kilometres away from where she lives. She does not support changes to the policy. Disagrees with the proposal to ban dogs from cemeteries. Believes it's a backward step, and actually the bylaw cemetery should be amended to reflect this, not the dog control bylaw changed in line with the cemeteries bylaw. Dogs should be allowed on lead in cemeteries to grieve with their owners. They provide significant emotional support at times of grief and sadness in people's lives. Do you support the proposed changes to the dog exercise maps? No. I strongly object to the removal or reduction of access to off-leash dog exercise area domains and parks for dogs in the council area. He disagrees that all public places the dog should be on lead, and feel the council should aspire to find suitable alternative areas for off-leash exercise to enhance the dogs and owners and be it well-being and enjoyment, and in all areas of Waikato District Council areas before it reduces existing spaces. Off-lead public areas is being successfully done within other New Zealand councils, so she cannot see why it's a problem within Waikato. She also would like further development to obtain country off-lead walking, thus enhancing owners' well-being, which has already been touched on. A local safe place for dogs to swim would also be a benefit, especially to rehabilitation and also for older dogs to exercise without strain, or for overweight dogs, etc. Now, I will input on that. If you're talking about the Waikato region, that of course is a matter for the Waikato Regional Council, as they have jurisdiction over the water. She talks about research that dog ownership enhances life as it counts together with a positive environment and improves health and well-being, reducing the financial strain on local healthcare and hospitals. 33% of New Zealand being a 1 or more dog home. She would believe that the council would be leading the way to enhance its residents' experiences, not limit it with further restrictions and permits. Council should not be creating a dog chain culture where dogs are left at home, in cars or outside family areas. She would like to see the council leading the way with dog-friendly and initiative ways to enhance her ownership through education and support. As to the preferred area, she says option 3, neither. And she disagrees with this. This is the exercise policy put forward, a proposal. It's far too small an area for the dogs in this area and would need a much bigger space. Tamahir is a large growing community, and with its extended boundaries into Martangi, together with a lack of lead domains and dog walking in other areas, it will be far too small. Finally, she says she needs more open areas in the council area, and for the council to be proactive and forward thinking to establish good dog cultures, education and dog recreation environments, and make Waikato District Council a truly dog friendly place to live, and not just offer the bare minimum. Those are her submissions. As you will be reading them as we've gone through, I've obviously missed some parts which are repetitive. I don't know if you have any questions, councillors.
You're on mute, Jan, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, that was useful. You mentioned initiative ways. I think, was that meaning to be innovative?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick bit of clarification on page 224, when the submitter's referring to the dog chain culture, is she implying that the reduction of off-lead areas will basically mean dog owners won't bother walking their dog on a lead? Rather, they will just be leaving them at home or in their car?
To be honest, I really can't answer that. Simply because I don't know what the submitter is thinking on that point. The only thing I can take from it is within the proposed bylaw, there is some mention, I've referred to it in my submissions, about where a dog control officer has the power to require a dog to be chained up and under certain circumstances. It may be that part that is coming through, but I think it may be that she's just referring to the generic issue of if there are no exercise areas and dogs are just going to be left at home in cars or effectively secured somewhere.
Thank you.
I'm speculating to something.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Carter before he moves to his next submitter? It would appear not. So who have we got next?
Florence Purbs, Purbes.
And that is, somebody help me with the page number here?
Page 226.
226, thank you very much. All yours, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This submitter strongly opposes the proposed introduction of permits in the rural zone areas and also objects to the issue regarding neighbours' consent, should the bylaw pass. She believes it's not in the benefit of dogs or the owners within rural properties and will not benefit problems that Tracy Oakes, the supervisor of the dog control, highlighted in her statement on the 1st of December 2021 and also in a telephone conversation with the submitter. Whilst it is unlawful to see dogs kept like this and in suboptimal conditions, to impose a 2-dog limit without a permit on good dog owners who have registered dogs seems both unfair and unreasonable. She herself, which I think is referring to Tracy Oakes, highlighted to me in our conversation that she believed it would make little difference to her work, as the homes that had problems were mostly unregistered homes where the complaints were laid and investigated. Again, there's reference to the only 7 properties that are creating the problems in the rural areas and alluding that the bylaw is therefore not the way forward to deal with that. She says time should be spent increasing the law for the SPCA, which of course is outside the jurisdiction of this hearing and in the council. She strongly disagrees with the proposal to ban dogs from cemeteries and raises the same issues as the previous submitter and other ones about support for their owners at a significantly emotional time. She says that the bylaw cemetery should, the cemetery's bylaw should be amended, not the dog control changed in line with the cemetery's bylaw. Do you support changes to the dog exercise areas? The answer is to no. Strongly opposes any move to reduce access to off-leash exercise space for dogs. This limits constructive dog training and socialization and is not in the interest of dog owners. In fact, she believes that the council should endeavour to increase and identify and implement alternative areas for off-leash exercise for dogs before it reduces existing spaces. That reflects the previous. Waikato District Council covers a large area, and the submitter does not have a dog park close to them and would have to travel to Tamahia and beyond. She believes that if other ones are closed, then other ones would become overrun and therefore unsafe. In the existing ones, that there should be a provision for shade, water and interest for the dogs to be included, as well as poo bins that are regularly emptied. Water venue for dogs should also be looked at. For dogs, again, I've touched on that because if it is a river, it's not within your jurisdiction. Open parkland should also be identified in all council areas for off-lead walking, and high street and other town areas should not be restricted. Waikato District Council should improve exciting dog parks and their experiences of owners and dogs, not just to provide the minimum. What is your preferred dog exercise option in Tamahia? Option 3, neither. Tamahia is, again, this is, I'm going to quickly repeat, that is now largely become a large social community, and with that will be the increase in the number of dogs, and says that it would have to be substantially larger. A dog should be exercised for a substantial amount of time and not just for a 5-minute walk. And that's the submissions on that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. A number of your submitters, and this one and the previous one, have alluded to it. The issue of the removal of some of the areas, and I'm looking particularly at the ward that I represent, Newcastle, and, which is the Whara domain and the Te Kaiwai Village Green. The issue there is that there's sports fields which are used by both schools during the week, and obviously played on by children and adults later in the day on weekends. My concern is that while people are submitting that they don't want those changes, there have been a number of people who asked for those changes, which precipitated the change, because of the defecation and urination by the dogs that are not being picked up. And while it may be a minority, how then are these clients of yours suggesting that council can deal with it, other than to move the exercise area to the surrounds of the grounds without actually playing on the sports field, without exercising the dogs on the sports field? It seems that council's damned if we do and damned if we don't. So have your clients instructed you in any way on how we can deal with this, please?
No, they haven't. And I take your point. I'm damned if you do and damned if you don't. Having worked for the Hamilton City Council, I know that feeling oh so well. It is difficult. Where children are present on areas such as sports fields, when you look at the Dog Control Act, the driving force of the Dog Control Act is for public safety and to aid in the registration of dogs. Now, the public safety part of it, and I'm in court numerous times with these matters, is there because it makes most offences, if not all, strict liability offences, which means that they're very easy to prosecute. Council just has to prove it happened. It doesn't have to prove why. Then the onus in law goes on to the dog or the defendant to prove that they took all reasonable steps, which is a common law defence. Not an easy defence to put forward. Dogs should not be off leash, in my view, and this is an objective position here. I'm effectively thinking of myself as an officer of the court and trying to assist. If there are children playing sports, that cannot, in my view, be a good thing to have a dog off leash. Now, it's perfectly acceptable to take a dog on leash. In fact, it happens quite often when football's being played on Saturdays or something. But if a dog's on leash, to a fair degree, it should be under good control. Not always, but it should be. So I can see some issue for dogs being off leash in an area such as a sports field. And of course, whilst all dog owners should pick up feces after their dogs, and I would suggest the vast majority do, with my Springer Spaniel, I never have less than 5 bags in my pocket. Some don't, and I can see it when I'm down by the river with my dog. It's a balance. And it's a balance that has to be brought by the council, looking at what is best for the community overall. And in that essence, if the areas involved are sports fields, then there is a considerable difficulty trying to balance a dog exercise area on a part-time basis, and then on an area where children and young people play sport. Because whilst there's organized sport, there's also unorganized sport where people turn up putting down the old 2 vests as a goalpost argument, as we did in our days, and you would play a game. Having a dog introduced in that is a disaster waiting to happen. And I accept that. I've seen it. When I've exercised my dog, I have seen people let their dog off leash when children are playing. It's just not a good idea.
I'll move to Councillor Gibb for her question. Thank you. I think you've answered that very, very clearly. Thank you. Councillor Gibb.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Carter, not specific to this submission, but to a few of the others also, you've mentioned a couple of times that people have thought our bylaw should be rewritten. And what I'm curious to know is if you've come across a very good, in your opinion, bylaw from a district council that has rural and urban that you would put up as a good template, because I would be very interested in looking at the differences in whatever that perfect, in your opinion, or near perfect bylaw could be.
There's no such thing as perfect law. If there was, I wouldn't exist.
No.
Thank goodness for bad law. There are some good bylaws around New Zealand. I have drafted one, and I was asked to draft it after the council involved had put it out to a non-lawyer to draft. And what that bylaw did in a certain area was allow every single dog in that area, no matter what their classification, but banned all police dogs, math dogs, customs and excise dogs, guide dogs. And that's how quickly a badly drafted bylaw, and that was about to be passed. So I then redrafted it along with the supervisor at the time from Animal Control. You can write good and effective bylaws. It's an inherent power of the council to do so. And in fact, it's an inherent duty of the council, because bylaws are relevant to the local area. Statute is relevant to New Zealand and doesn't always fit every scenario. A good bylaw is only as good as its enforcement. And so together with a good bylaw, you have an effective team that are not only good at detecting and interacting and teaching, but are also good at enforcement, and when required, pursue a prosecution quickly and effectively. And
yes, Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter, thank you for that. I just wanted to know if you had a council, the district council particularly, with rural and urban, that you could put up as an example of a good bylaw.
I only know the Hamilton City bylaw. I know of others, but they're not good, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are no more questions in this part of it. Who's your next submitter, please?
It's a Robin, R-O-B-Y-N, Hutton, H-U-T-T-O-N.
And that's page 116. Thank you.
The proposal will hinder the ability of good dog owners to rescue, foster, and look after farm-out dogs for a period. That's referring to the 2 or more dogs in a rural area. In terms of exercise, all dogs need off-leash areas. Reducing them does not enable or improve dog welfare, or foster good ownership behaviours. Clearly, unexercised, unsocialised dogs would become a greater problem, and most dog control officers meet that on a daily basis. If dog welfare is the basis of the changes, then all dogs, including working dogs, should be included. There should be dog-friendly initiatives, as other councils do, rather than trying to drive honest good ownership and your constituents into the ground. The proposal may result in more people not registering their dogs to avoid needing to apply for a permit and having to get neighbours' permission. And she asks, where's the rationale between the selected number of 2 as opposed to 3 or 4? Fostering and rescuing would become almost impossible, which I've touched on, in this type of scenario. And I think that that is a very valid thing to raise, because it is vital that the welfare groups and charity groups, all of which basically exist on a shoestring budget, have the ability to foster out dogs in their care. Otherwise, they will become very overrun. In essence, punishing the many for the crimes of the few, she believes that education and encouragement should be promoted, and disagrees in essence with the proposed bylaw and policy. That's the submissions.
Thank you. Assuming there are no questions on that, which there don't appear to be, would you like to move to your next submitter?
It's Olivia Prowse, P-R-O-U-S-E.
Page 119.
Thank you so much.
I'm very grateful to that person. I'm not sure who it is. But
I'm very grateful to that person too.
Is he?
Well, yours, Mr. Carter.
Thank you very much. Rural permits. She's opposed to the permits for more than 2 rural dogs. That's highlighting that rural properties are the areas where 2 or more dogs are the best place for them. Looking at the welfare issue, she believes that permits will not improve dog welfare. And if problem dogs are not registered, then they should be dealt with and not allowed to be registered and kept. Of course, registered dogs can be seized. In essence, she's raising that dog registration is the way that council should be using to enforce problems in a rural area. And the bylaw is to minimise danger, distress and nuisance to the community generally. It does not say to remove zero danger, distress or nuisance, and permits appear to be pushed by councillors based on specific incidents are trying to use permits to reduce this to a 0 level. Dog parks. She's opposed to the removal of dog exercise areas. The bylaw needs to enable dog owners to enjoy the benefits of dog ownership and to provide for exercise and recreational needs of dogs and owners. Current parks and prohibited areas do not provide sufficient exercise and recreation. And she also raises that they are not safe for a person such as a single woman to be able to walk dogs, as most are away from built-up areas where unsavory types hang out, so they can only tend to be used during the peak times when there are plenty of people around. Part of being a dog owner is being able to give your dog areas to run free off leash and to socialise with other dogs. Forcing dog owners to drive further to run their dogs is not looking after the dog or owner population, as we are being forced to drive when petrol prices are increasing and less driving is being pushed. Currently in Takao, and excuse my pronunciation, I'm an Englishman and therefore poor pronunciation of New Zealand words, there is Centennial Park, which is an off-leash dog area, which is easy for people to walk their dogs to for a run and then walk home without driving. The Calfide Domain, which also has off-leash areas, is also poorly fenced and not safe for off-leash dogs. The removal of the Alexandra Redoubt Reserve, with the reason being that it's between 2 cemeteries, when the dog ban from cemeteries could be reversed with submissions soon from the cemeteries bylaw review. That is also speculative into the future. The road that runs alongside is low traffic and it's a dead-end road, so it'd be easy to reduce the speed limit along this point of the road as traffic is not traveling fast anyway. I acknowledge the work involved with reducing speed limits on any road. In addition, the Whangareta domain in Tauke will be a good start to adding more off-leash dog exercise areas. And socialization of dogs around people in the main streets is important in making dogs good canine citizens, and taking dogs up the street to cafes for coffee, lunch, and is a large part of having a dog. I'm turning to cemeteries. Against making dogs prohibited in cemeteries under this bylaw, as they are currently under the cemeteries bylaw. If brought in under this bylaw, then it makes it nearly impossible to be able to get this prohibition removed from the cemeteries bylaw and the dogs to be allowed back into cemeteries. That would in fact create some difficulty with the clash of legislation. Again, refers to dogs being a form of solace, and especially for people that live alone. The whole policy should be reconsidered, and it appears there is little or no professional outside training given on a yearly basis to animal control officers. How can animal control officer staff members have only some internal training and would be deemed competent, especially when dealing with dogs often under stress, and be allowed to make decisions on the euthanasia of sentient beings without formal evaluated training?
So that's an operational issue, not a bylaw.
That absolutely is. I'm just trying to.
I understand. But we have read this one as well.
Yes. She talks about dissecting of dogs using registration money. Also seems to be very expensive given the numbers of dogs. I'm not going to go into the issue of dissecting dogs.
Okay.
Overall, the general impression given by a few vocal councillors on Zoom workshops and council meetings about the dogs bylaw and policy is that the council has made up its mind and these changes are being pushed through, and that they do not want any opposition either from each other. That, Madam Chair, is the essence of the submissions. I know that you will be reading them and have read them as
We have, and thank you for your excellent summary. I do point out a line in this which says several councillors in the Zoom meeting appear to be extremely frightened of dogs, and I would suggest that you cannot make a judgment on people via the appearance on Zoom. So that's purely my comment. Are there any questions for Mr. Carter on this one? No, it would appear our question well is running a little dry. Who are we up to next?
We're now at Janet Bardsley, B-A-R-D-S-L-E-Y.
And that's page 400. Thank you.
So, again, this is a short submission. The opposition, she opposes a limitation on the number of rural dogs and also the removal of off-lead dog parks in Waikato, specifically in Tamahea district. She says that there's no appropriate spaces to exercise dogs off-lead. The one off-lead is small, unfenced, and is too close to a children's play area. It supposedly has river access, but the banks are unstable and the tracks are not maintained. I note that, of course, banks and the Esplanade, it does not come under your council's jurisdiction. Off-lead areas need to be suitably sized so that dogs have room to run, and separation of large and small dogs, shade, water, and waste disposal areas. Responsible dog owners are required to exercise and socialize the dogs, and the parks and cemeteries that are already in our area can be used by all residents in a shared usage model. There are many precedents already in place around the country. Auckland beaches and Tauranga City already have shared usage. A large proportion of dog owners are responsible dog owners, and we pick up after our dogs and other dog feces. We pick up trash and notify the council of damage to facilities. We are taxpayers and our dogs are licensed. Please consider thinking outside the box and actively engage with tax-paying and voting local residents. That is the solution.
Thank you. Extremely clear. Thank you very much. No questions. Then we should move on to your next one.
This is David Phipps, PHIPPS.
Can somebody help me with that number?
Page 483.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carter?
Thank you. In answer to the general question, do you support the proposed changes in the bylaw? The answer is no. This proposal victimizes the majority of good owners who are responsible because of a few non-compliant people, and it's a sledgehammer to hit a pin. Do you support the dog control policy? No. Money can be spent better on educating people to be good dog owners than by changing the bylaws for no good reason. There is adequate legislation in place. I do note, this is me speaking, that the policy does have an education process through dog control officers. Yeah, the idea that rural dog owners who want to keep more than 2 dogs should have to apply for a permit and have inspections is unwarranted, given that the number of complaints relates only to a few owners. Looking at the dog exercise map areas, no support for that. Given that the government is now allowing infill housing and there are likely to be more dog owners in the district, more exercise areas and accessible places are needed, not less. That is clearly going to be happening across many councils, especially with the change in the Building Act. Option 3, she takes neither for preferred dog exercise area. He does. Neither is suitable by way of size and location, especially for medium and larger dogs, which need bigger areas for off-leash exercise. Any exercise parks must be fully fenced and have water and clean-up facilities. And that concludes that submission.
Thank you. Are there any comments, questions for Mr. Carter on that one? Just from my perspective, there is always a balancing point between the 1/3 of people who own dogs and the 2/3 of people, equally ratepayers, who presumably do not, and trying to balance what services we give. But I think this has been very, very good points raised, and they are helpful. So thank you, and on to your next submitter.
That is Selina Fraser, Fraser.
205, I think. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
194.
Moved. Thank you.
Does not support the changes to the dog control bylaw. In particular, the removal of 7 off-lead dog exercise areas reduces the availability of owners, which dog owners can use. This will put pressure on the remaining areas. Raises the issue of exercise being an important part of owning a dog, and it should not be made harder. In regards to prohibition areas, because of dogs not picking up dog drop-ins, this will not stop the issue. Obviously, there's an enforcement ability under the Dog Control Act for that. There's an infringement offence. Any dog owner who does not follow these rules are unlikely to follow any other rule. Council does not have the staff level to enforce this, so again, it will affect those that follow rules, and these owners are not the problem and should not be punished. Talks about COVID time, having multiple areas outdoors is essential, so there's safe exercise areas. And the council should ensure that the welfare of dogs is at the root of these changes, should be paramount. Exercise and the ability of owners to ease access areas should therefore be encouraged and restricted. Does she support the dog control policy? No. She says that the proposed changes are not given in enough detail for me to support them. I cannot agree to changes that will be finalised after a process. Do you support the proposed changes to the exercise areas? No. And that she goes back to the removal of the 7 off-lead dog exercise areas. And looks at the proposed new Tamahiri dog exercise park. She goes for option 1, grass area at Tiawa Reserve at Tamahiri. And she just then thanks for allowing this to be presented. That's that submission.
Right, moving on to your next one, Mr. Carter.
This is a Michelle Morland. I'm just thinking of, somebody correct me, have I already done that one?
I have you crossed out for that one, so I'm thinking that you did.
Right, thank you very much for that. It does ring a bell. Kim Foster, Foster.
472.
And she says she has lived in the Waikato for about 9 years. She's always been in a rural and has had at least 2 dogs or more. Prior to this, she lived semi-rural on 2 other properties and wanted 2 dogs over that time span of about 10 years. She's never had a complaint about any of her dogs. She abides by the rules and is extremely careful and responsible for her dogs. Surrounded by farms, cows and sheep, and not once has any dogs ever jumped the fence or entered the farm property or street. She considers herself to be a very careful dog owner. And one of the main reasons she moved to her current property was her ambition to create a hobby of breeding kennel and to enhance improving the working line German Shepherd breed. She supplied pups to the police, search and rescue, among other working roles. She's proud of her accomplishments, but she could not continue should she only be allowed 2 dogs on her property. This would be disappointing and sad, frankly, since I put so much effort and soul into the quality of animals that she owns and breeds. Please consider this when you make your decision. I am and always have been an avid dog lover, and they are really inspirational animal and fulfill so many important roles in life. Those are the salient points of that solution.
Thank you. They are, and clearly, if this bylaw was to bring in a permitting system for rural dogs, that would not necessarily stop I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name, the submitter from applying for a permit and being able to continue. So I think you'd concur with that. Yep. Thank you.
It goes back to drafting.
Correct. Thank you. All right. So
the next one is Kurt Parks, Parks.
I'm not going to give numbers because I appear to have a slightly wrong numbered one. So, Ms. Clark?
Page 728.
Good on you. Thank you.
Is the dog control bylaw as proposed supported? No. He says that these changes will only make dog ownership more difficult for those who already obey the rules and register their dogs. Raises the issue of that it appears to be trying to address problems that exist on only 7 properties. And shouldn't government resources be going to help those dogs and prevent people from owning unregistered animals? Says that the proposed changes will only encourage dogs not being registered and making the problem worse. Is the dog control policy supported? The answer to that is no. And further comment on that, again, says makes dog ownership more difficult, again raises the 7 properties issue, and again reiterates what I've just said. Do you support the proposed changes to the dog exercise maps? No. Any further comment, build more fenced dog parks, don't take them away. And the preferred area in Tamahiri is option 1, grass area in the Te Hawa Reserve, Tamahiri. That's that submission, Mum.
Thank you, sir. No questions on that one. So your next submitter.
Amiola Gray, Gray.
Ms. Clark?
(264).
Oh, thank you very much.
Very short. This submitted does not support the changes to the dog control bylaw, does not support the changes to the dog control policy, and does not support the changes to the dog exercise area maps. The preferred dog exercise area in Tamahiri is option 3, neither. That concludes that submission, Ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. So your next submitter?
Robert Matthews, double T.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you double tasking, Your Worship?
Well, the issue here is I'm reading through these, but they're actually got withheld. So I'm just assuming that is what James is going to talk about.
Right.
So what's the number, please?
Oh, what I do? 205.
205.
Thank you.
This submitter does not support the changes to the dog control bylaw, does not support the changes to the dog control policy, and does not support the proposed changes to the dog exercise area maps. Option 3, with regards to Tamahiri Exercise Park, being neither. I note that the councillor wanted to know if I was going to be able to expand. I'm not. Those are exactly how it's been sent to me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
We're getting close. Charlotte Warren, W-A-R-R-E-N.
Ms. Clark, do you have a number for us here?
Hang on a minute.
I've got that down as 317 with the same submission number as on the thing on page 317. And it comes under the name of Nicole Starkey.
Do we have that submission, Ms. Clark?
Yes, her name was withheld, so.
Right here. Okay.
Page 205.
Sorry, page.
205.
Thank you.
In short, the proposed changes to the bylaw is not supported. It refers to the dog registration regarding more than 2 dogs seems unfair. Gaining neighbours' permission could become difficult and would create more neighbourhood politics than for dog welfare. Costs would increase, and where there is a no proposed cost for 18 months means that there would be a cost thereafter. He only owns 1 dog, but objects to the amendment, noting due to the overwhelming evidence that only 11 complaints out of 3,000 made every year are linked to just 7 residences. Excuse me. Do you support the dog control policy changes? No. She says that she can't support the documentation, does not explain what the changes are. A new policy has been developed. This expands on the responsibilities of both council and dog owners and how dogs should be registered. In theory, I'm sure I would support these, but they just seem unspecific at this time. Turning to the dog exercise area maps, she does not support that. This is the area that she feels strongly about. All these changes just seem to be reducing more restrictions, and it is a shame that council is not looking for what you can do for dog owners rather than shutting down access for dogs. I understand the issues with dog excrement is not at all acceptable, but where can we take our dogs instead? The nearest 2 dog exercise areas are now going to be completely off limits to dogs. The other place she walks the dogs is Raglan, which also faces changes. She talks about Tamahiri Park and with the limitations. She's becoming increasingly frustrated with Tamahiri, having so much council funds put into it. It's great that they have a brand new riverside, the huge playground and the potential dog park, but as funds are limited, how about sharing this to other areas? The option preference is option 3, neither. That is a submission on that one.
Are there any questions for Mr. Carter on the submission? If not, may we move to the next one?
That is Nicholas Starkey, as alluded to by one of the councillors.
Page 317.
The submitter does not support the proposed dog control bylaw changes.
What page was that? 187.
317. Sorry, Mr. Carter.
Right. I'm going to be careful not to reiterate previous. Again, raises the issues of the small number of complaints referring only to 7 properties over 5 years, and that therefore that the proposed changes to the bylaw for more than 2 dogs is not required. Property inspections, payment of fees and consultation with neighbours is heavy-handed and penalises the law-abiding dog owners. And in fact says that such a move may result in less registered dogs. Makes reference to the costing to enforce and to run such a permit system. It appears not to have been costed, and therefore would it really provide a substantial benefit. Welfare issues could be dealt with under existing law. She then looks at how many complaints have been lodged about farm dog welfare. However, that could not be challenged because it was refused under Lagoima using section 17F, just as a bit of information. Any changes to the policy must be backed by clear and logical rationale that includes information and complaints regarding 1 and 2 dog households, as well as those with 3 or more. Do you support the proposed changes to the council policy? The answer is no. Insufficient detail is the given reason. Do you support the proposed changes to dog exercise areas? No. It is well known that exercise is crucial for dog welfare. The current proposals reduce the off-leash dog areas, which give limited opportunity for dogs to socialise and exercise, and will have a detrimental impact on dog welfare. Option 3 is neither. To the asked question of exercise park option in Tama here. And in finality, she says that then is a need to provide an increase in safe fenced off-leash areas. That is a submission. If there are any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Carter? I would just make the point, sir, that internal costings are the task of the staff responsible for their own budgets. It's not something we would normally consult on how we would manage our internal work and the cost thereof. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
How's your voice holding up there, Ian? Going well?
I'm down to cold tea.
Oh, that's very good for your throat. So next submitter.
And the last one. It is Nicola Hinton, Hinton.
Page 322.
322, thank you.
She says, I have read through your latest proposal and I'm not happy to see permits proposed for rural areas for more than 2 dogs. You live in a rural area and bought it for the freedom and the privacy and space, which includes the freedom to have more than 2 dogs. If we wish, as we clearly have, the space to be able to exercise them without a nuisance to the public and neighbours. Excuse me. Feel the need to gargle, but I will refrain. We live in a rural area. I've already done that. I realise there are people within communities, both rural and urban, who neglect dogs, allow them to roam, and have not trained them sufficiently. Therefore, they can become problematic. Penalise those who are responsible via permits and policies and reducing dog exercise areas is, in my opinion, a ridiculous way of controlling the problem. Responsible dog owners are not the problem and should be left alone with the current policies we have. Instead of spending more money policing more policies, how about the setting up of regular dog training courses in the community based around the dog parks, or help advertise the trainers we have locally to help in this endeavour. Repeat problem owners need to be educated so that these trainings can be a place where they send, else they forfeit the right to own a dog. Doesn't believe that policies and permits, or more of them, will work, and administration costs, which have been touched on, equals less money available to educate. He's a registered German Shepherd breeder. and at times will have more than 2 dogs on site. The dogs are secured in a big enclosure when I am not home. She says she will not be mucking around with permits anytime I exceed your limits. My dogs are my life, and I do not consent to being micromanaged by the local authority. She's a responsible dog owner like most people. She spends her rate money wisely by enforcing the current laws and penalising the minority who allow their dogs to roam and cause havoc. Not seen much urgency coming from this council dealing with menacing roaming dogs within the town. Most likely there are dogs that are unregistered, which is where most of the budget should concentrate on, and on the rule breakers. Finally, keeping our community safe should be the priority, not data collection and extra revenue gathering. And that is the end of that submission. In fact, those are all my submissions with 15 minutes to spare, Madam Chair.
Well, that was a Herculean task managed in a very well-timed way. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the way you handled this.
Yeah, if I can just summarise very quickly. Having interacted with my clients as well as the wider dog control community, and obviously you realise I'm a dog owner, there is a fear of the proposed bylaw as is. A bylaw can be very, very effective if it's drafted well, and it can target those problem areas if it's drafted well. The Dog Control Act itself is a very strong act, and when I've compared it to other countries, for example, the United States, it is far more prohibitive than the United States, which have a different system. Over here, we have dog destruction on conviction. Very hard to argue exceptional circumstances since the Court of Appeal decision in 2020. But where, if you go to America, for example, where you would simply think it would be stronger, it's not as strong. Dog destruction is not as tough as it is over here. So the laws are in place. The powers to enter properties are vast. The only place a dog control officer cannot go is a house, a dwelling. And actually they can under very, very limited circumstances, but it'd be unwise to use that power. Other than that, through safety reasons. Other than that, a search warrant is required together with a police officer being present. The powers are wide. The bylaw in my submission as written won't assist in dealing with problems. Permits in rural areas. In my objective submission, and I live in a urban area where permits are an essential part of urban life. In a rural area, they're just not required. Good targeting patrolling, good effective detection and prosecution is required. And I note that your council has an in-house lawyer who is exceptionally gifted as a prosecutor. So the cost to council for prosecutions is considerably less than other councils such as Hamilton City Council who brief matters out. So you have a very good system in place to deal with issues with dogs, and it drives back down to operational considerations. An effective bylaw, which is a requirement under the Act, can be affected if well drafted. Dogs can be properly prohibited from some areas, and they do so in Hamilton and many other councils. It has to be proportionate. You can't ban dogs from the entire vicinity, a bit like gang paraphernalia. But if it's targeted well with a clear rationale behind that decision, a good bylaw can be effective. It is my submission, Madam Chair, that in its current format, it can't do what it hopes to do. I believe that a well-drafted one will, but I also objectively do not believe that permits in the rural areas will actually succeed as is hoped. And those are my submissions, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Carter before we move off to the next submitter? It would appear not, and I think, well, I want to thank you firstly for the way that you've managed this, for the range of topics that you've introduced. Many of course, on the same point. But for me, a number of things have stood out, mostly starting with an E. So you talked about exciting dog parks, or somebody talked about exciting dog parks, talked about education, and you talked about exercise, and you yourself just talked about effectiveness of a well-drafted bylaw. I think there's been many points also raised in your group of submissions in terms of rescues, foster homes, of hobby dogs, of show or more dedicated, well, not dedicated, but more owners using their dogs in a different way. So I thank you for the richness that you've brought to this and the clarity and actually your impeccable timekeeping as well. So thank you for that, and a sterling job. I think you're deserving of a cup of tea.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the elected officials for listening to me. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, sir. So we move, I believe we have a submitter in the waiting room.
Yes. Up next is submitter 2967, Helen West for Huntly and District Kennel Association Agility Club on page 207.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? I
Yes.
note that there is another submitter from the Huntly and District Kennel Association. So is there two submissions, or why is what's the difference here, please? You've got Pam Douglas, Huntly and District Kennel Association Incorporated, and we've got Helen West, Huntly and District Kennel Club Association.
This is a submission from a separate person.
From the same organisation.
You there's no limit to how many people from an organisation could submit.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. West, thank you. You've made it. Thank you for waiting so patiently, and we have read your submission. You have 10 minutes to let us know the salient points and also any questions from councillors should they be needed. So the next 10 minutes is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Are you able to hear me
Absolutely,
okay?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So yeah, my name is Helen West, and I made a written submission on the dog control bylaw and policy review. And I'm now speaking in both my personal capacity as a dog lover, owner of 2 dogs currently, and a Raglan ratepayer, as well as in my capacity as secretary for the Huntly and District Kennel Association Agility Club. At the risk of being labelled one of the unruly women, I think it was that they were called in a previous council Zoom meeting, which indicated a disappointing level of disrespect, I would like to say that these restrictions seem to me to be just yet another example of the removal of New Zealand citizens' personal freedoms without any logical reasons. I have just spent a week in Wellington at the Freedom Convoy protests, and I must say that my faith in government was completely destroyed as we witnessed there the fall of democracy, yet my faith in humanity was restored. There are some wonderful people living in New Zealand, caring people who love their communities and all who live in them, people who want to have freedom of choice and expression, people who live and let live in our wonderfully diverse community. And it is indeed this diverse community and the lifestyle that we used to enjoy in New Zealand that has brought many people to our beautiful country. And by the same token, people who've chosen to live rurally have often done so to further enjoy these freedoms and the space and privacy available to enjoy their lifestyle with livestock and companion animals. Once these freedoms are taken away, they will not be given back. As you know, there were 664 submissions received against the proposed restrictions, including these restrictions, which include restricting the number of dogs to 2 that can be owned in a rural property without a permit. And this is because of only 7 households where the complaints originated, some of those households having large numbers of dogs. And that just doesn't seem to be logical that the remainder of the people are blamed for 7 households' misdemeanours. As we all know, the control of dogs and the protection of the public is the council's responsibility. and the SPCA is generally responsible for the Animal Welfare Act. Responsible dog owners who register their dogs are not the problem. The owners who do not take responsibility for their pets or fail to provide sufficient care will continue to operate in this manner, and it is the responsible owners who will effectively be punished. I'd like to remind you as well, Council, that dog owners are also ratepayers and residents of the Waikato district, and our views matter too. Please don't dismiss us as being simply a fringe minority in favour of what you may perceive the majority want, or to pander to popular opinion, as unless they are dog owners, people probably don't really have an opinion or certainly any vested interest in what is happening rurally with dog owners. I'd like to reiterate also that dogs need exercise and socialisation to be able to be good members of society. I participate in dog agility training and obedience training, and I compete in agility all over the country. The majority of people who enjoy our sport have multiple dogs at various stages of competing and, of course, retirement. And I see no reason that these people who enjoy spending their time enriching their and their dogs' lives should be penalised. There is no logic behind these proposals. Chained and restrained dogs are only more of a problem and end up displaying antisocial behaviour out of frustration, even escaping and roaming the streets, which is far more of a hazard. I would like to see more support for dog training courses, as this would benefit the whole community, together with any education that can be offered. I'd just like to finish by saying I object to any bylaw or policy which restricts either the responsible owning of dogs or the freedom to exercise them appropriately off their own property. This will lead to division amongst our communities and undoubtedly higher rates charges to police such regulations. I thank you very much for listening to my submission and only hope that the outcome is not a foregone conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. West. No, the outcome is not a foregone conclusion. As I explained at the beginning, the process of these hearings is to gather in everybody's points and information, and then that goes to deliberations. I really thank you for taking the time to submit, because it's really incredibly helpful when we get information from people who offer constructive thoughts. So that's helpful. Are there any questions for Ms. West? Councillor Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your submission, Helen. My question is really, you obviously know a lot about dogs. So if there was actions or activities that council could participate in to improve dog behaviour or lessen the issues that we all have and the dangers, have you got anything inputs into what those might be?
Yes, well, I believe there used to be some benefits, probably financial benefits, when registering your dog if you had completed a dog obedience course. I'd like to see that reintroduced. I have previously been an instructor for Waikato Canine Obedience Club, and that certainly would increase the number of people that were coming to get basic dog obedience. A lot of people who get dogs, maybe it's their first dog, they don't really have any idea of how they should be training the dog, what the dog should be expected to do or not do. And we were able to offer these basic obedience courses, which just gave them a better understanding of how to train their dogs, how to get a better behaved dog that listened, that could be under control and not a menace to their neighbourhood or the wider community. So I'd like to see something like that reintroduced, not just in Hamilton as well, in all of the areas in the Waikato district. And also I'd like to see more events like the Dirty Dog competition, for example. That's always hugely popular because people just love doing stuff with their dogs. And the more things that people can do with their dogs in a responsible and controlled manner, the more dogs are able to get out there and be socialised and be better citizens in our community. So anything like that should be encouraged. I know that there's a rag dog muster planned for Easter, I think it is, in Raglan. Again, just a big group of dogs being able to walk on the beach. It's all controlled. There's traffic control in place. So just encouraging things like that so that people have an outlet to take their dogs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good answer. Are there any more questions for Ms. West? If not, thank you very much for your submission. It's really, as I say, it's really helpful when people do take the time to do it. Appreciate it's not easy, and we're grateful that you do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
Next up, we have submitter 3006, Nicole Peacock, on page 119.
Ms. Peacock, we can see you, but you are muted at the moment.
Got it.
Well done, well done. Now just sit still. We're good. You're good. We can see you. We can see you. We can now hear you. And we're ready for your submission. And the next 10 minutes is all yours.
Radio. By way of introduction, I think mostly what I want to talk about is the implementation and the whether or not it's been thoroughly thought through realistically. Thanks. Okay. All right.
We can now hear you. And we're ready for your submission. And the next 10 minutes is all yours.
Madam Chair, it's the speaker got the YouTube on because it's going to be a
Yes, yes, you do need to turn that off, Ms. Peacock.
Okay, I got that there. Okay,
and we have read your submission. Thank you.
So mostly I'm talking about the reality is that I think in many rural properties, the owners don't actually register their dogs, thinking the dogs won't leave the property. So I'm wondering how council is going to be aware of the dogs, which household have dogs if those dogs aren't registered. If you could answer that for me.
I don't have, we don't have any animal control officers who would answer that, but it will be a point that we will be asking on your behalf during the deliberations.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you for raising that. That's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be a lot of work. I mean, the only way around it I can see is by going from property to property, and I don't think that's realistic. But being on the ground here and living rurally, I'm quite aware of places who do, but the majority of them, the dogs that say that, including, of course, with the exemptions, the farm dogs, they're exempt, so they won't be checked for welfare, even though some of them may require it. The hunting dogs, I think, also gain exemption, and my concern is it's the hunting dogs that I can see are often in poor welfare, kept on chains, kept underweight, not exercised, abused, as they're useful. They're obviously not pets, they're working dogs. I'm wondering how you were going to find these dogs unless there's a complaint or a nuisance dog. There are dogs that kill stock and they're not registered, so they're unable to be traced. Therefore, the farmer cannot get recompense for the stock. So this is on the ground, what's happening. I would love for council to be able to move in and help these dogs if they need it, but finding them is going to be an issue in this regard. The other thing I just want to talk briefly about hunting dogs. Hunting dogs are not specifically a certain breed. They're a mixture of certain breeds. To have an exemption, all they have to do is exclaim, "This is my hunting dog." The dog may not be a hunting dog; it might carry a multiple of breeds. Like with farm working dogs, we've generally got heading dogs, hunter-ways, collies, and those types that are bred to do that job. Whereas these hunting dogs are put into that position for work. Some of them are good, some of them not so good. Some of them not so good will usually get dispatched. And yeah, my concern is getting the welfare to those dogs by locating them, because they're not registered through lack of exemption, and that's really important from what I've seen. Irresponsible dog owners with those staffy pitty breeds and crosses with greyhound and whatnot. Let me just have a look at other points. Hold on. Another point is that if you implement the more than 2 dogs permit, I understand what you're doing there, but the problem is that you're immediately something into position, whereas you'll come out and you'll permit the dogs, these 2 dogs. One, the person may hide the others at that invitation. The second one is they'll get a 3rd, 4th dog, but not register them or make you aware of that. Now you've given them the permit, they've gone ahead and gotten more dogs, and these dogs are now are not able to be checked as far as welfare, because once again they're off the radar. And they'll avoid registering them too, in order to avoid going through the permit process, which is a possibility. I was watching earlier, and you talked about the charge, the fee becoming less to make it more understanding why you are checking these dogs for welfare. So it doesn't seem as much as a money grabbing thing, which I've heard people talk about. If you lower the fee, then it's more encouraging in a way for people. There's still going to be a lot of resistance, but it'll be more encouraging for the owners to take part in it, knowing what you're doing. So the dogs that are registered, these real dogs that are registered with you, these dogs will be checked. The people that register these dogs are the people that are probably giving great care. They're responsible dog owners. They're keeping an eye on nuisance problems. They're making sure that their dogs are looked after. I think the majority of them will be registering pets, and pets part of the family and whatnot. That's almost a given that they're going to be looked after. That's responsibility. Ones that are not pets, that are useful, probably not the same thing. I know I'm speaking in very general terms, but I've seen it. Let me have a look here. I just want to talk about the recent increase in subdivisions and property titles. And there are cases in now that houses are getting closer together, so the lifestyle blocks are moving into farm places, and you often have, as with history through New Zealand, the farm dogs are often in kennels and taken out to work. These dogs are high energy dogs, and any sound or noise are going to kind of join in and make a bark. So you've got lifestyle blocks that are starting to complain about farm dogs that have been there for a long time. With them being an exemption, is it going to be difficult for council to come in and look at the welfare of these dogs, unless it sometimes in violation.
I think you raised some very good points there, Ms. Peacock. We do have a question for you if you are prepared to take a question.
Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Smith, I'm just conscious of time. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. However, you have confused me, which doesn't happen that often. You were talking about hunting dogs, and under 11.1 of the proposed bylaw, it says no person shall keep 2 dogs, blah, 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 except where the dogs are working dogs and are kept within a single dwelling premises.
Yeah.
You talked about hunting dogs as if they're working dogs, but hunting dogs are not included in the bylaw as being exempt. So can you just clarify what you thought or what you understand as working dogs or hunting dogs or both, please?
Dogs, farm dogs, sheep dogs. I understood, maybe I got confused that the hunting dogs are also exempt. And who defines? No, they're okay. They're not?
No.
Oh, we'll leave that then. I'll move on to something else quickly.
You just
That is the proposal at the moment. That's the proposal at the moment, but we have to hear from the hunting community later in the submission process. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So if you can
one more minute.
take my points into account there. Forward. Let's see. Excuse me. We'll skip past that. Yeah, another part with a hunting dog, if that does go forward, who stipulates? Is the council stipulates what a hunting dog is, or is the owner that stipulates? Something else. Oh, the nuisance dogs. If you have more than 2 dogs, and you can walk in and nuisance dog from nuisance barking and whatnot, and one dog can do as much noise as multiple dogs. So I'm not sure where this 2 dog maximum came from regarding welfare and nuisance, given that one dog can be poorly treated as well and be a nuisance as well. Owners of 3 more dogs, I believe seeking out monitoring these owners won't equate to making a large difference in preventing poor dog welfare and nuisance complaints.
Ms. Peacock, I'm going to stop you there. So I'm afraid your time is up, but you've made a number of points, and clearly they will be points that, like others, will be included in our deliberations so that we've got a really rounded base of information to move from.
Okay.
Thank you for taking the time to submit. I know it's not always easy and can be a little scary, but thank you very much for that. We appreciate that you took the time to do it.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Clark, I think we have a submitter in the waiting room.
Yes, submitter 3096, the Dinsdale Hunting Club on page 496.
It's the implementation and the
There you are, Dinsdale Hunting Club. Now we've read your submission. Thank you very much for taking the time to do it. And the next 10 minutes are all yours, allowing some time for questions if needed.
Thank you. Craig Horan here, representing the Hunting Club. I'll be doing my personal one tomorrow.
Okay.
Just before I start,
We have read it as well.
Yeah, invite Ms. Peacock to watch my submission at 9:30 tomorrow. My personal one. Could be interesting for her. Okay, the Dinsdale Hunting Club, 90%, I'm representing them. 90% of the members are in the Waikato District Council. And obviously, as a pig hunting club, we have more than 2 dogs, so we strongly oppose the introduction of permits in rural zones. We could class our hunting dogs as working dogs, as defined in our submission. As you read, a working dog is stated in there. I've got a question for you. If a farmer has 10 working dogs and 6 pig dogs, does he still have to apply for a permit?
Under this proposed bylaw, those hunting dogs would not be classified as working dogs, and therefore, yes, this is as it's currently drafted.
as it's currently drafted.
And that's why we're seeking submissions.
Okay, yeah. So even if we did include hunting dogs as working dogs, this is not gonna resolve the problem of bad dog owners. Us honest owners that register our dogs, we're going to carry on, and we're going to get penalised for these guys that are out there abusing their dogs. My personal dog area, I've spent over 20k on. They've got a sandpit, a swimming pool, and they're all pig dogs. They've got a sun platform to sun themselves. They've got trees. I can't see why I need to be financially penalised to house more than 2 dogs. On top of that, I have my son that lives here, and we have multiple members in the Dinsdale Hunting Club that have sons or family that live on their property that both have packs of hunting dogs. So we might have 3 each or 4 each. So you could have 8 dogs on a property. How's that going to affect if this bylaw goes through? We're unsure. We need to know. Or I have a mate come down from north for a week's hunting. And he brings his 4 dogs, and they're here for more than 72 hours. Correct me if I'm wrong. We need to know this. A lot of the other stuff I was going to say, Mr. Carter's covered this morning, so I don't want to take up all your time.
I do have a question for you if you would like to take that now.
Yes.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your submission. I have 2 questions. Firstly, I am a farmer. We are on the land.
Yes.
Fortunately, we don't have pigs as pests, but I'm well aware of other farmers that do, and do actually have a need to have hunting dogs to control those pigs. When you take out I guess it's a team of hunting dogs, how many normally would you take out? Because I know that they don't work individually, do they? How many would you normally take out in a pack to be able to control that as a pest problem?
It varies on the type of dog you hunt or the pack you hunt, but on an average between 4 and 6. But in saying that, you need young dogs coming on. I personally have got a dog that can't hunt anymore, and she's now a house dog. So that counts. I've got me 4 that I use. Well, I've actually personally only got 3, but my son has got 3. So we've got 6 dogs on our property at the moment, but we need really to get another one to get a young dog coming along. So in saying you might only need 4 dogs to hunt, you need up and coming ones and ones that you've got to retire. What do? I'm not putting them down. They're part of the family. I'd end up divorced. My wife would leave me if I had to do that.
Thank you. Have I got time for another question, Madam Chair?
Can I just go to Councillor Smith first, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, and hello, Craig. Just to acknowledge that Craig rang me a few weeks ago, and we had a very polite and rational discussion on the dog bylaw. So, Craig, I'll probably just ask one of the questions I think I asked you when we had our own side conversation. How does council know what a hunting dog is? Because in my experience as in previous occupations, there have been multitude of breeds and one under the phrase mongrel, multiple breed dogs. How would a dog ranger, animal control person know what a hunting dog was just by looking at them? Whereas if you look at a dairy, say a sheep and beef or whatever, you've got hunter ways, you've got eye dogs, you've got border collies, which are known breeds of dogs that work with animals. So how would we know what this is not a strict question, but how would we know which is which?
A fair question. It's actually quite a good question. We did cover in our submission, the hunting club submission, that at time of registering dogs, it's not hard to send proof of being an affiliated member to a hunting club or a national body like the New Zealand Pig Hunting Association to prove that we're hunters. As far as visually for a dog ranger to look at a dog and say it's a pig dog, 90% of pig dogs are either tattooed or freeze branded for certain clubs we hunt in. An example is the Peninsula Pig Hunting Club. I hunt over the Coromandel. We've got to have our dogs freeze branded. So you could look at my dogs and see the freeze brand clearly. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on white dogs. So my white, I've got 2 white dogs. The freeze brand won't work on them. So that wouldn't work but my darker coloured dogs, the ranger, you can tell straight away.
So is there very many people who have dogs, hunting dogs, pig dogs, that aren't members of a club?
There would be a percentage, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Eyre, you've just got very minute or so.
Councillor Smith has asked my question.
Asked and it has been answered. There are no more questions, but look, thank you very much. You've brought a different dimension to this. It's all really helpful to have as much information as possible as we head into our deliberations. So thank you for making such a full and interesting submission.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that brings us now, I believe, to the end of our morning session. So please don't log off because it's the same Zoom number. And if you can be back ready to go for 1 o'clock. Thank you very much. Are we off YouTube as well? Then presumably by that we're off.
What's that, sorry?
No, the recording has stopped and so we are now not live on YouTube, is that correct?
Yes.
It's still showing as us live on YouTube.